Well, hi there, and welcome to Slooh, your interface to outer space. I'm your host, Jerry Monteur, and today we celebrate some of the most gloriously interesting things in our night sky. I am speaking of comets. Today is the anniversary of the discovery of Comet Hale-Bopp, which came to be known as the Great Comet of 1997. It was actually discovered on July 23rd, 1995, but later became an absolute superstar among comets. And tonight we will tell you and show you why. Now, before we get started, I'd like to welcome those of you who are watching us right now on Facebook. And I would like to encourage you all to check us out on slooh.com. I guarantee you'll be impressed. And then I urge you to become a member, because if you do, you'll become part of our Slooh community, and you'll be able to operate our telescopes on your own and observe for yourself some of the comets that are visible tonight, as you're about to see. All right, let's get right to it. Slooh astronomer Paul Cox joins us now to walk us through all of our feeds and what we'll be looking at. Paul, welcome aboard. As always, good to see you. First of all, we've got breaking news, essentially, an exciting discovery made by a Slooh member this week, right?
We can actually fill up a whole show just with news today. And before I get to the Slooh discovery, there's other breaking news, Jerry. We've got the new solar telescope looking at the sun every day at the Canary Islands Observatory. That's where we're looking at now. And Slooh members will know that about 10 days ago, we were tracking this enormous active region crossing the face of the sun. And just today, there's been, the space telescopes have been measuring this massive explosion on the other side of the sun, the far side of the sun. And it's this coronal mass ejection that's come out of this active region that we were looking at. Now, if that had happened when that active region was facing us last week, then chances are we wouldn't be talking now because our communications would be down. But anyway, that's breaking news. So that is going to come back into view, by the way, probably in about 7 days' time. But yes, a nova discovery. Slooh member Emmanuel Conseil lives in France, and he has added to his tally of discoveries using Slooh's telescopes. And this time it's a nova in the nearby Andromeda Galaxy. And you can see the image here. So we're just looking at one portion of the Andromeda Galaxy. And just to the left of you, you can see these two little red marks. And that is marking this nova, which is absolutely astonishing that Emmanuel manages to spot these things happening. But, big congratulations to Emmanuel Conseil once again for another discovery using Slooh's telescopes.
But again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Paul, this is something that really any Slooh member, it's possible, but you have to be a member. And that's one of the beautiful things about becoming a Slooh member.
Absolutely, and Emmanuel came in, and he shares his expertise with other members, but other members also shared their expertise with him. And in fact, we got another example. Two members last week, Bernd Lutkenhoner and Jonathan Tutton, they managed to image or take some of the first confirmation images of a new comet. I mean, how cool is that? So they get notification, from whoever's discovered it, and immediately they pointed the Slooh Canary Islands telescopes up to this new discovery and helped confirm that there it is. Very unmistakable. That small fuzzy patch against the stars streaking in the background, that is the comet that they helped confirm last week. So plenty of news happening in the Slooh membership, that's for sure.
All right, good stuff, Paul. Now let's talk about our telescopes. What are we looking at right now?
Oh, yes, we have got a great lineup tonight. Now, the observatory has only just open. So, the images are literally hot off the press kind of thing. Now, Canary 1, this is our half-meter telescope. This is our flagship telescope at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. And we've trained this one actually on a comet that we'll talk about a little bit later, Comet 41P. It's a periodic comet. Now, if you're a viewer, you'll see that there are some tabs below the video panel if you're watching at slooh.com, and you can flick through each one of these feeds and you can snap your own images. Now, Jerry, in that live stream that we're looking at now, there is Comet 41P. But you can't spot it. It's so small and so faint against those background stars. The only way our viewers are going to be able to spot it tonight is to look at several images coming in from that half-meter telescope, and they'll see this little white dot move from one place to another. And it's actually one of the comets that Slooh members have been studying. But we've also got our Canary 2, that's a 17-inch telescope. Once again, it's a massive telescope that Slooh members control every night. And we've trained this one on a comet which is slightly easier to see, and you'll see it as a very, it won't look like a star, it won't look as pinpoint sharp as a star, it'll look slightly fuzzy, and that's the giveaway that it's a comet. And this one is Comet C 2016 M1 Pan-STARRS. Bob Berman might share some information on how comets get named a little bit later on. So that's the Canary 2 telescope, and once again, viewers can snap their own images of this and start comparing it to see which one of those white dots is moving. But we got a bit of a bigger comet as well, and I am delighted that this is the debut, actually, of our Canary 3 Deep Sky telescope. Now, it's still a little bit twilight, which is why this image is a little bit blue at the moment, but we're going to see this particular feed get stronger and stronger throughout the show. And there is, right in the center of it, Comet C 2015 V2 Johnson. Now, this is fascinating. From a couple of years ago, when it was discovered in 2015, Slooh members had one of the very first confirmation images taken of this particular comet. And they were able to do it even though the comet was so faint, because Slooh's big telescopes are there with these research scientific grade CCD cameras, and of course at the Canary Islands Observatory, 8,000 feet up on a volcano. It's a world-class site. But we've got one more live feed coming in tonight. This is the first time we've ever had 4 of our telescopes at the Canary Islands all at the same time. Now, this is a lot easier to see now. This is our Canary 4 Solar System telescope. This is tuned specifically. It gives us quite a high magnification view of the planets normally. But here we can see the same comet that we're looking at in the Canary 3 telescope. It's Comet C 2015 V2 Johnson, but they're quite distinct here. We can see the bright coma and the fuzzy tail coming off this particular comet. Now, if members and viewers keep an eye on this feed tonight, what we're doing is we're using a whole bunch of different processing techniques for each mission. Every 5 minutes, it's going to run a new mission to this. So some of the images will come in on color. Some will start off kind of quite dim in grayscale, but build and build and build until we see more and more of the tail. So really some cracking feeds that we've got tonight, Jerry.
Well, Paul, you're the man when it comes to setting up the feeds, the telescopes, picking the telescopes, and also picking the time of the show. And tonight is a particularly good night for viewing. And why is that?
Oh, look at that. The Canary 4 Solar System telescope has just popped into color. And there we can see this really distinctive greenish hue. Bob can tell us about that a little bit later as well. But why comet's green? And you can see just how diffuse that tail is. It's coming off the comet's coma, its head, in quite a large fan shape there, Jerry. But anyway, yes, tonight, it's so good, and we can tell why tonight is such a good comet hunting night by looking at our all-sky camera. And make sure we haven't got any of your feedback.
And we welcome you back. We apologize for our technical difficulties. Jerry Monteur, along with astronomer Paul Cox, on this, the 22-year anniversary of the discovery of the comet Hale-Bopp. So we're talking comets, and we're talking about Slooh membership, Paul. So what is it that Slooh members need to do? How do they track and observe comets?
Well, as we were saying, Jerry, tonight is an absolutely perfect night for tracking and monitoring comets and looking at this all-sky image. This is a special low-light camera at the Canary Islands Observatory, which is looking up at the whole sky, 180 degrees across. And as we can see there, there's no moonlight to spoil the view of these quite dim objects. We can even see there's the Milky Way kind of running from 11 o'clock down to about 6 o'clock in the bottom of the image. So a perfect night for comet watching. And comets, frankly, I think without question, have always been the most popular targets for any Slooh member to watch. It's what most members want to learn how to do to set up a Comet mission. And it's because they're all different. The ones that we're watching tonight, they're all different. And not only are they different from each other, but they also differ over their own apparition. So as they get closer and closer to the sun, their perihelion approach, they get brighter and brighter, the tails start sprouting and stuff like that. But what happened a few years ago, I don't know if you can remember, Comet Ison. Comet Ison was it was slightly overhyped, I'm afraid. It was going to be, everybody was told, astronomers were telling everybody in the world, it was going to be a great, great comet. And actually it was one that went out with a bit of a fizzle. But what NASA did was they mobilized for the very first time a whole army of amateur astronomers to take part in what was called the Comet Ison Observing Campaign. And Slooh members got together and formed their own group to participate and collaborate in that project. And in fact, Slooh members gathered up more ground-based observations of that than just about any other observatory around the globe. But that wasn't enough. It kind of sparked this passion and this group work, and it kind of morphed into this second project, this pro-am collaboration between professional astronomers and amateur astronomers. And this was for Comet 67P. Now, if you remember, Jerry, Comet 67P was the target for ESA's, the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission. And they sent their little probe there, and the little Philae lander, if you remember, kind of didn't really touch down as much as kind of bounce across the comet. But once again, Slooh members took a very large leading role in that whole campaign. And at this time, they gathered more data from 67P using the Slooh telescopes than all of the others put together. But that finished last year. But yet again, it morphed, the whole campaign morphed. All those same people at Slooh got involved, and it's led by Slooh member Christina Feliciano. Now, we were hoping to have Christina on the show tonight, but unfortunately she's been taken ill, so wish you well, Christina. I hope to see you down at the eclipse in Idaho. I know she and her family are coming over to join us. But the latest project, Jerry, is what's called the PACA, which stands for Pro-Am Collaboration Astronomy, once again between professionals and amateurs. And this time it's called the PACA 4XP. And that's because they're tracking 4 comets, all that start with the number 4, all that end with the letter P. So there's 41P, which is one of our targets tonight. And this is it. It's in that image. This is one of the live streams that we've got. In between the different images, you'll spot one of those little dots is slightly fuzzier than all of the others, and it will move between each image as it comes through. So we've got 41P, we've got 45P, we've got 46P, and we've got 47P. And what was interesting on this last week, Christina told us that Slooh members were the last man, woman standing once again, because we've got these mighty telescopes at a world-class observing site. So we're able to image, Slooh members are able to image these comets when they get incredibly faint, down to magnitude 18. And all of the other observatories that have been participating in this have had to fall out of the program. So once again, Slooh members taking an absolutely leading role in this comet monitoring and these huge pro-am collaboration campaigns. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll say it is. I'll say it's cool. Paul, we talk an awful lot about, enticing people to become Slooh members because it's all about community. And there's something called community content. And viewers really should take a look at that, shouldn't they?
They should. I mean, this is really where Slooh astronomer members hang out. They exchange expertise, data, images, ideas, all manner of things. And there's a great example, actually. So if any members are there who have not seen this, a couple of the members captured another comet. So we're talking about comets tonight. This was Comet C 2016 N4 Master. And it photobombed the Andromeda galaxy. Here, we got the image. This is the image that I put together. Now, I've reversed the image here, Jerry, so because it makes it far easier if you kind of look for faint objects on a negative. So that big black splodge down on the left-hand side, that is the Andromeda galaxy. where Emmanuel Conseil last week discovered the new nova. And there's a little satellite galaxy up at the top right-hand side. But there you can see this tiny little comet master whizzing past and photobombing the Andromeda galaxy. And that's a great example of community content, because not only were members able to capture it, but Christina gave us a heads up that this was going to happen in the first place. So bang, everybody jumps on the telescopes, controls it, points it at that particular target, and then we all share, the fun of looking at the images afterwards.
Well, again, come to slooh.com, and folks, that could be you. All right, Paul Cox, thank you so much. Some terrific images to look at this evening and this week while the skies are moonless, correct?
Indeed. Absolutely.
All right.
Oh, look at this one, Jerry. Look at that.
Yeah.
Here we've got very obvious in this one. Sorry, I know you want to get rid of me, but I get too excited for this stuff. This is our Canary 2 telescopes. This is a 17-inch telescope, and there we can see this classic comet. So we've got a bright star, which is slightly orange, right in the center of the screen. Just to the left of that, it doesn't look like a star, does it? It's got that kind of little fuzz to it. And there we see on the clip there, it's Comet M1 Pan-STARRS. And during the show, people can be watching this stream, and you'll see that little smudge moving against the background of stars. I'm made up. That's a fabulous image. Great conditions tonight.
Well done, my friend. Now you got to go. All right. Paul, appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by another Slooh astronomer. It's Bob Berman this time. He'll tell us all about the comet discovery that marks our celebration today, the comet Hale-Bopp. And after that, Slooh's human spirit editor, Helen Avery. And we'll swing by to talk about comets, of course, and specifically Hale-Bopp, and why this discovery was especially interesting and the tragic consequences it would have for one group. That's all coming up next, right after this. We've been all over the world chasing solar eclipses to share with you. This time, you're coming with us. Join Slooh as we expedition to Stanley, Idaho to celebrate the transcontinental eclipse on August 21st. Sign up today at slooh.com. Space is limited. And we are back, and tonight celebrating the anniversary of the discovery of Comet Hale-Bopp, which happened back in 1995 on this day. So to introduce us to this comet and some of its scientific importance, and there's a lot of it, is our friend Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. Bob, welcome to the show, my friend. And let's talk about the discovery of Hale-Bopp. First of all, how it got its name. And I mentioned when it was discovered, but how?
Well, comets are often discovered by amateurs, and comets are really the last object that gets its name from the discoverer. I mean, you or I could find a new galaxy or a nebula that nobody's ever seen, and we could wait till the cows came home and nobody would name it Comet Jerry or Nebula Bob or Galaxy Bob. But comets, they still keep that tradition. So in this case, they were co-discoverers, two people, Alan Hale, a professional astronomer, and a very interesting guy that I spent about 10 days with on that year of his discovery, because we did a comet cruise together in the Caribbean, kind of a fake type thing, honestly speaking, because you could see it just as well from Kansas than going to the Caribbean. But everybody wanted an excuse to go to the Caribbean in March. So we went there that next year, and I was seated with him. It turns out we were both pilots, and put two airplane pilots together, they'll just keep yakking and endless stuff. Our wives almost fell asleep, but gave me a great chance to learn about him. And yeah, he discovered it just by accident on that night of July 23rd of 1995. And he had no idea. This was just an amateur astronomer with a bad back working at a jewelry store. He had no idea that he was going to be propelled into the co-discovery of the largest, brightest comet in more than a century. Because when it comes to celestial things, sure, we love to see the Slooh telescope bring out a faint comet at the edge of the solar system. But when it comes to something like a total solar eclipse or a great comet, one that can be seen through the lights of city light pollution, that's something else again. That's rare, and that's what we got that year. It was discovered way back between the orbits of Jupiter and Saturn, much farther than comets are normally first seen. And so Tom Bopp was able to see something normally that you couldn't see at all. And as it got closer, it became obvious that this is a huge comet, many times larger than Halley's Comet, for example, and a comet with a strange orbit, too. So almost everything about it was weird, but weird in a good way.
What I find particularly fascinating about Hale-Bopp, Bob, is that when Hale and Bopp discovered it, it wasn't clear. I mean, you couldn't see it with the naked eye, but roughly 18 months later, you could. It got bigger and bigger and brighter, didn't it?
It really did. Of course, it was not naked eye when it was discovered in 95. It reached naked eye brilliance in 96, about May of 96, and then stayed, as you say, stayed naked eye bright for 18 months. Now, that doubled the previous record. And that you had to go back to the 19th century, the 1800s, before there was a comet that could be seen without any equipment, just with the eye, not just for a few weeks, not just for a few months. In that case, 9 months. In this case, with Comet Hale-Bopp, 18 months. It almost got, tedious.
Almost. So, for obvious reasons, this was an important discovery because it was bright and it was huge. What else made it so important?
Well, its orbit. Instead of orbiting the sun in the same flat plane that all the planets go around the sun, this one orbits, as comets sometimes do, at a wild angle. But this angle was 90 degrees or 89.6 degrees, just 90 degrees at right angles to the solar system, which means it goes straight up north into space. It comes straight down at us and could be quite dangerous, hit us at a very high speed. In fact, the approach speed, if this were to hit us, would be so large that the figure is 4.4 billion megatons would be the impact, which is about 50 times greater than the impact that destroyed the dinosaurs, the CT extinction event 65 million years ago. This would be, you're talking about far more energy than even that. So this is a potentially dangerous comet with a strange orbit, goes straight up and down. When was the last comet that orbits the sun at a 90-degree inclination? Comet Bennett, back in 1970. Old-timers who have been into comets since forever would say, well, there was, I'm talking like my grandfather now. Well, sonny boy, you should have been around for Comet Halley's Comet in the fall of 1985 and the spring of 1986. But that was just so-so. But we remember Comet Bennett in 1970. That was a naked eye comet. We remember just a few of the really bright ones that came by. And this was the brightest of the bright. This, Jerry, was we talked earlier about, I think it was Paul who was talking about Ison disappointing us because it was a fizzle. Comet Kohoutek fizzled us in the early 1970s. It was expected to be the comet of the century, and it was just the bummer of the century. You couldn't even see it naked eye from a dark site. So something has to make up for it, and Comet Hale-Bopp did. This was one of the rare ones that got brighter than expected, and even through polluted city skies, you could see it not just for a few days or a few weeks, but for 18 straight months. Part of the reason was that giant size of it, 30 miles across. That's several times the size of Halley's Comet.
Okay, so for a year and a half, It was naked eye visible. It was that big, that bright. So now it's 20 years later. Is there a chance that we could see it now? Is there a telescope out there, Bob, that could pick it up?
I think the Slooh telescope could faintly pick it up as a pretty unimpressive tiny smudge with a long enough exposure. It's at the edge of the solar system. It goes out quite far because its orbit is 2,525 years. This is, it's not like Comet Halley with its 76-year orbit. This is over a 2,000-year orbit, which means it goes far out and with a distance of about 186 Earth-Sun distances, or AUs, 186. Pluto is 40 AUs typically, and this is 186 AUs. So it's more than 4 times the distance of Pluto from the sun. But when it comes to its closest approach, it's just about the same distance as Earth is. And that's why it can plunge in and come pretty darn close to us. The combination of that giant size and close potential closeness to us means that even though you have to wait around over 2 millennia for it to come back, when it does, it can put on quite a show. We got lucky this time.
Well, you said it's far out there now, and I guarantee you a lot of people, when they saw it back in '97, said far out, man.
Yeah, we had a whole ship full of people that had signed on just to do it. It was me and Tom Bopp and Fred Whipple. Most people think of Fred Whipple as that guy, Don't Squeeze the Shoreman guy.
Yeah.
And that was the name they used for that famous commercial, but they took it from the greatest comet expert in history, Fred Whipple. He and his wife were also there. Wonderful guy. He's now since passed away, but it was quite an honor for me, the three of us being the leaders on this cruise ship, to see a Hale-Bopp. It was also fun to watch Tom Bopp, because this was early on before the comet had fully brightened, and every night we'd go on deck and wonder whether it was really getting bright enough to be on track to be the great comet that we were all hoping for. And to his amazement, Tom Bopp saw that, yes, it really is brightening up. It's really going to do this. And he was eventually invited to watch shuttle launches and invited to Cape Kennedy. And so he got quite a bit of fame from this accidental discovery.
As well he should. So before we let you go, Bob, just generally speaking, what do comets mean for the scientific community? Why do we love to study them?
Oh, there's so many reasons. They're leftovers from the early part of the solar system. They contain lots of water. There's still a thought that maybe Earth's water, our oceans, came from the early bombardment in the Wild West years of the solar system, when there were collisions between everything and everything else, and we got hit all the time with comets. And maybe they brought in the water. In fact, every meteor shower, even the Perseids and the Geminids and the Leonids, the ones we love to show you here at Slooh, every meteor shower are chunks from comets, and all of that debris coming in, even those are tiny chunks, they deliver water to Earth's atmosphere that eventually condenses down and becomes part of the water in our lakes and oceans. So that's one big reason. Another is maybe they harbor early primitive pre-life forms. And the other, as I'm sure Helen is going to explain, goes to our lore and legend and mythology and culture, where comets were associated for endless centuries with actually evil and sadness and catastrophe. And a new comet was not at all a good thing. These days, a comet, a naked eye comet, which comes along every 15 or 20 years, is a glorious, beautiful, awe-inspiring object. But for most of history, its reputation was not that kindly, as I'm sure Helen is going to get into.
Well, Bob, like I said before, far out. Hey, thanks so much for joining us tonight. As always, great stuff.
Jerry, a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Coming up after the break, it is Helen Avery, our human spirit editor, talk about all the other reasons comets are important to humans, whether in distant history or more recently, and why Comet Hale-Bopp was a significant discovery. So stay tuned. Give the gift of the universe. Give the gift of Slooh. A celebration of every magical moment in the night sky. For just $60, you can give the budding space explorer in your life the gift of a full year of Slooh membership. It's available now at slooh.com. And we welcome you back once again as we continue to talk comets, because today is the anniversary, the 22nd anniversary of the discovery of comet Hale-Bopp. July 23rd, 1995 was the day and the year. Now, we learned earlier why comets are important to the scientific community, but what has made comets interesting to humans? Before we fully understood them, our human spirit editor, Helen Avery, joins us now to tell us all about that. Helen, welcome back to Slooh.com. Comets have often been omens of change, but to be honest, I mean, this is a dance we've done before, isn't it?
Yeah, we've talked about this on previous shows, just how comets were perceived by our ancient ancestors. And as Bob sort of alluded to, that they were not seen as a good thing. And that was typically because Earth was seen as a place of great chaos. You know, there are volcanoes and weather events, but the heavens were much more predictable. The cycle of the moon was predictable, the sun was predictable, the constellations moving through the sky were pretty predictable. So when things turned up that people weren't expecting, like a comet, it put the fear of God into people. They thought something really bad was going to happen. So, you know, for the ancient Chinese and the Babylonians, comets were seen as sort of portents of famine and drought and the end of empires and dynasties, and not something to be thought about with wonder and awe at all. And it's interesting because, you know, some of that still remains in humanity. You know, to some, you know, on the lowest end, people can get a bit superstitious around comets, and on the sort of other end, people, you know, associate them with, they apply negative meaning to comets and say like the end of the world is nigh or upon us or stuff.
So then along comes Hale-Bopp. We're in the mid 90s now. Okay, this is not the Stone Age. We're in the mid 90s, and it's a fireball. There it is, right there in 97, visible with the naked eye. It's huge. It's bright, and it's monstrous. But I assume also that you're going to regale us with some Hale-Bopp stories.
Yeah, it's so unusual. So, like perihelion was 1997, so this was like the great comet of 97, and for some reason, Hale-Bopp came with all these stories about UFOs. That it was thought that in the tail of Hale-Bopp, and there was a theory, if you can believe it, or it was a belief, I'd prefer to call it, that there was, a spacecraft within, you know, in the sort of wake of Hale-Bopp. And, you know, interestingly, like 96, 97 saw up to that point the record number of UFO sightings reported. And I don't know whether that was because more people were looking up at the sky because Hale-Bopp was visible and they saw things maybe they didn't understand, and so just put it down to being a UFO, or whether there was something in the collective consciousness at that time. You know, this was an era where X-Files had just come on the screens, Independence Day, Men in Black was out that year. So maybe there was just like a real like excitement about UFOs or something like that. But it had a bit of a tragic association because there was a US cult that sort of piggybacked on this idea of there being a UFO following Hale-Bopp, that resulted in the members of that cult taking their lives to teleport to that spacecraft that they believed was going to take them onto a higher spiritual level. So, but actually, there are a lot of photos around that time of the alleged spacecraft following Hale-Bopp, and astronomers came out and said no, that's actually a star, or it was dust, or in some cases it was just a hoax.
Well, speaking strictly culturally now, what else was the feeling on planet Earth about Hale-Bopp, Helen?
Well, it was just phenomenal. I mean, I'm sure you remember it. I remember it. And, as we've talked about, it was visible, it was enormous. And what was so magical about Hale-Bopp was that it was a once in a lifetime experience. And if you're into reincarnation, it was a once in a 500 lifetime experience, because the last time it came around was over 4,000 years ago. And the next time that you're going to see it is in another 2,000 odd years. So, I mean, and I think that really sort of captured people's sense of wonder. Because if you think about it, the last time humans saw the perihelion of Hale-Bopp prior to 96-7, the Egyptians were just building the pyramids. The city of Troy was existing. Europeans had not discovered, I think they'd only just started using a plow. And the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, the ancient Romans, and the ancient Greeks weren't even a glint in someone's eye. We talk about, the influence of the Greeks and Romans on the shows a lot, about their stories of the constellations. That was nowhere to be seen. So it's sort of just so wondrous to think that you get to share in this experience that is so, so rare. So it really had a lot of people talking about it and going outside and looking up in wonder. And the same year was actually a solar eclipse in China and Russia. So you can imagine that, thousands of people went to see that event. It sort of beats our solar eclipse even that's coming.
By the way, I just want to alert our viewers right here. We're looking at a live view of Comet C 2015 V2 Johnson using our solar system telescope. We've got several scopes up there right now that are showing views of comets. So it's just another reason to become a Slooh member. And finally, Helen, Hale-Bopp, do you think it left a lasting impression on our culture?
Totally. I mean, obviously here's some art that was inspired by Hale-Bopp. So obviously during that year, there was poetry about Hale-Bopp. There were songs with Hale-Bopp in the title. Although interestingly, Bop was out that year and had nothing to do with Hale-Bopp. So I don't know if you remember that song by Hanson, which was like the song of my college years. That I was hoping there'd be something.
Thankfully, I don't.
But it had nothing to do with Hale-Bopp. But there were songs out and poetry and paintings. But it's interesting because that there's still poetry being written that refers to Hale-Bopp. And Douglas Copeland, who I don't know if you know him, but he's an author. He was well known for writing Generation X. But he wrote a book 7 years after 1997 called Eleanor Rigby, and it's about a character who sees Hale-Bopp and then her life changes because of it. So it's so interesting how it sort of continued to just influence us. I don't know about you, but I remember very well that whole year. It's like osmosis. I just sort of knew Hale-Bopp was there in the background. And I was in England just finishing up my first year of college. And it was sort of this big year. It was the year Princess Diana died and Tony Blair got elected. But there was always this sort of Hale-Bopp going on in the background. So, and we feel this, there are other ephemeral moments that we sort of come here and Slooh and come together, and they sort of become part of you. They become part of who you are and the stories of your life. So yeah, I think that anything like this sort of changes you and sort of stays with you and continues to influence you and inspire you. And in fact, I would love to hear from people on community content if they want to just write in. Do they remember where they were when they saw Hale-Bopp? What do they feel about that year? How did it impact them? How does it impact them still? So yeah, have a look. And I put a lot of what we've talked about tonight on community content, so you can go and read it afterwards.
We will. We will. And by the way, when something is a part of our lives for 18 straight months, it has to have a lasting impression.
Yeah.
All right, Helen, thank you so much. Good stuff as always. Take care. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, that puts a wrap on this show. And don't forget, another reminder, we've got big plans for this summer, including our road trip. If you haven't made your own total solar eclipse plans yet, don't forget that Slooh apprentice and astronomer members can join us in Idaho for our Eclipse Festival. Starting Friday, August 18th and running until Tuesday, August 22nd, we're inviting all Slooh members to join us in Stanley, Idaho for a weekend of fun, science, music, and more at our reserved campsite. And the best part, it's completely free to all members of Slooh.com. Also, later this week, on July 28th, we'll be watching the Delta Aquarids meteor shower. That's just 5 days from now. So keep your eyes on Slooh.com for that show. We'll talk all about meteors. And don't forget, for all of you watching on Facebook, you can join Slooh.com and be a part of our community, whether we're discussing all the things that we can see or tracking comets. We're tracking a comet right now, making new discoveries, or just looking up at the stars and planets with our telescopes. Slooh is a great community, a terrific way to learn everything you need to know about space. All right, that's all for this time. I'm Jerry Montour. Thanks for stopping by here on Slooh, your interface to outer space.